Daniel Harold Rowling.
Rules say I have to give Mr. Rowling an opportunity to have a say. You have anything you want to say, Mr. Rowling?
I recall the day I first saw you. I reached out to say I love you, but it was hard to say. I couldn't touch you. So tell me, baby, what were my words? All my tears run together.
Excuse me, Mr. Rowling.
Down the path you choose to follow.
Mr. Rowling.
Daniel Harold Rowling was born May 26, 1954, Shreveport, Louisiana. Danny Rowling was born in Shreveport, Louisiana. His father was a Shreveport police officer named James Rowling, who told Danny that he was unwanted from birth. James also abused and beat Danny, Danny's mother Claudia, and his brother Kevin for frivolous things such as breathing in a way that displeased him. In one incident, Danny's mother went to the hospital after claiming her husband tried to make her cut herself with a razor blade. She made repeated attempts to leave her husband but always returned shortly. In one example of the senior Rowling's sense of discipline, he pinned Danny to the ground, handcuffed him, then had the police take his son away because he was embarrassed by him. In another story, Danny had a dog, but James would beat the dog so often that it died in Danny's arms. As a teenager and young adult, Rowling was arrested several times for robberies in Georgia and was caught spying on a woman getting dressed. As an adult, he had trouble trying to assimilate into society and hold down a steady job. At one point, Rowling worked as a waiter at Pancho's restaurant in Shreveport. In May of 1990, he attempted to kill his father during a family argument in which his father lost an eye and an ear.
Catch the mood, huh?
Rowling murdered 5 students, 1 student from Santa Fe College and 4 from the University of Florida. This took place during a burglary and robbery spree in Gainesville, Florida. He mutilated his victims' bodies, decapitating one. He would also pose them, sometimes using mirrors. In the early morning hours of Friday, August 24th, Rowling broke into the apartment shared by 17-year-old university freshmen Sonja Larson and Christina Powell. Finding Powell asleep on the downstairs couch, he stood over her briefly but did not wake her up, choosing instead to explore the upstairs bedroom where Larson was also asleep. Rowling had murdered Larson, first taping her mouth shut to stifle her scream, and then stabbing her to death with a kabar knife. She died while trying to fend him off. Rowling then went back downstairs, taped Powell's mouth shut, bound her wrists together behind her back. He then SA'd her and followed that by stabbing her in the back 5 times. Rowling posed the bodies in provocative positions. He took a shower before leaving the apartment. A later day, on Saturday, August 25th, Rowling broke into the apartment of 18-year-old Christa Hoyt, prying open a sliding glass door with a screwdriver. Finding that she was not home, he waited in the living room for her to return. At 11 a.m., Hoyt entered the apartment and Rowling surprised her from behind, placing her in a chokehold. After she had been subdued, he used duct tape to gag her mouth shut and bind her wrists together behind her back and led her into the bathroom where he would SA her. As in the Powell murder, he stabbed her in the back while she was face down, rupturing her aorta. After arriving back at his campsite, Rowling could not find his wallet, thinking he may have lost it at the murder scene. He later claimed his intent was to add to the shock of whoever discovered her. By this point, the murders had attracted widespread media attention, and many students were taking extra precautions, such as changing their daily routines and sleeping together in groups. Because the spree was happening so early in the fall semester, some students withdrew from their enrollment or transferred to other schools. Tracy Paules, who was a 23-year-old, was living with her roommate Manuel Taboada, also 23. On Monday, August 27th, Rowling broke into the apartment by prying open the sliding glass door with the same tools that he had used previously. Rowling found Taboada asleep in one of the bedrooms and killed him after a strangle. Hearing the commotion, Paules went down the hall to Taboada's bedroom and saw Rowling. She attempted to barricade herself in the bedroom, but Rowling broke through the door. Rowling taped her mouth, wrist, SA'd her, and stabbed her in the back 3 times. Rowling posed Paul's body, but left Taboada's body in the same position in which he had died. With the exception of Taboada, all of the victims were petite white brunettes with brown eyes like Rowling's mother. Although law enforcement initially had very few leads, police did identify 2 suspects. This would make him the ideal image when discussing news about the investigation. His photo was shown repeatedly by media outlets. Authorities publicly cleared him of all the charges after Rowling's arrest. The other suspect was also later cleared. Louisiana police alerted Florida authorities to an unsolved triple murder in Shreveport on November 4th, 1989. Detectives noted that there were few similarities between the Gainesville murders and those of the 55-year-old William Grissom, his 24-year-old daughter Julie, and his 8-year-old grandson Sean. The family had been attacked in their home as they were preparing for dinner. Afterwards, Julie Grissom's body had been mutilated, cleaned, and posed. Don Maines, an investigator on the case with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, traveled to Shreveport in November of 1990. Because of the similarities between the murders committed in Gainesville and murders committed in Shreveport, they included posing of the victims, tape residue on the victims' bodies, and vinegar used to clean the body. Maine said they tested the body fluids from the perpetrator in Shreveport and found that this person also had type B blood. He called the match to the evidence in Gainesville a relation in the case. Shortly after Maine's trip to Shreveport, a Shreveport resident, Cindy Jurisich, called Crime Stoppers and reported that Danny Rowling was possibly connected to the murders in both cities. 3 months earlier, in August 1990, the report made her think about Rowling, whom she met at her Louisiana hometown church, and his possible link to these 3 other Shreveport murders. Rowling had said deeply disturbing things to both her and her then husband, Steve Dobbin. She quoted, "He'd come over every night for a while, and then one night Steven came in and he goes, 'He's got to go,'" Jursich said. Dobbin told her that Rowling had told him he had a problem, Jursich said. Quoting, "I said, 'What kind of problem?' Jursich said, and Steven said, 'He likes to stick knives into people.'" Jursich said that she dismissed these comments when she heard about them because she didn't want to believe that Rowling could be responsible for the murders in Shreveport. Danny had also told her, "One day I'm going to leave this town and I'm going to go where the girls are beautiful and I can just lay in the sun and watch beautiful women all day." News of the Gainesville murders hunted for Jursich, so she finally contacted the police in November based on her hunch about Rowling's connection to the murders in both cities. Quoting, "It would not let me rest," she said. Quoting, "One day, I picked up the phone, I called the Crime Stoppers, and I said, I think there's one guy y'all need to investigate. Danny Rolling." Investigators responded to the tip and quickly found Rolling, who had been arrested on September 7th in 1990 for an Ocala supermarket robbery. The robbery had been committed 10 days after the bodies of Paules and Taboada were found. Rolling was being held in the Marion County Jail 40 miles south of Gainesville. Investigators determined that Rolling had type B blood, like the suspect in both the Gainesville and Shreveport murders. Once Florida investigators realized that Rolling had multiple convictions for armed robbery, they realized he could have also been responsible for the bank robbery that occurred on the day Christa Hoyt's body was found. They returned to the evidence locker where the gun, screwdriver, bag of money, and cassette player had been stored, and listened to the tape. They also found tools and matching marks left at the Gainesville murder scenes. The small camp where he had been living was in a wooded area near apartment complexes frequented by students. Investigators discovered audio diaries he had made there alluding to the crimes.
What they brought out on this trial was just monstrous, heinous, horrible things that it should not be tolerated.
As a student say, anywhere you take this trial, it was so heinous, so horrific that any jury anywhere would have come to the same conclusion.
But those closest to the victims say Rolling's death recommendation doesn't give them what they want.
We know that nothing we ever do can bring her back. If they kill Danny Rolling, they lock him up forever. Christy will never come back, and so that's hard. That's why this will never be over.
Rolling was brought to trial nearly 4 years after the murders. He claimed that his motive was to become a superstar similar to Ted Bundy. In 1994, before his trial could get underway, Rolling unexpectedly pleaded guilty to all charges.
Danny Rolling, for whatever reason, and it's far beyond what I'll ever understand, decided to visit horror on this town and on these students in ways that it's unimaginable.
Rolling terrorized his victims, Sonja Larson, Christina Powell, Christa Hoyt, Manuel Taboada, and Tracy Paules.
Subsequently, State Attorney Rod Smith presented the penalty phase of the prosecution. During his trial, Court TV conducted an interview with Rolling's mother from her home, during which his father could be heard shouting off camera.
When James corrected Danny, it was always harsh.
On April 20th, 1994, Rolling was sentenced to death. Rolling was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and paraphilia.
Those recommendations were unanimous and identical, jurors deciding 12-0 that Danny Rolling should die in the electric chair.
It shouldn't take 9 years for him to go to get the chair.
It can't take 10 years for him to go to the chair. I mean, why can't the chair just be in the courtroom?
Shortly before he was executed in Florida for the series of killings in Gainesville, Rolling claimed responsibility for the murders in Shreveport, handing his spiritual advisor, Reverend Mike Hudspeth, and Florida police a handwritten confession and apology. In a written statement made shortly before his execution, Rolling confessed to the murders of the Grissom family in Shreveport. Rolling had a last meal of lobster tail, he sang a gospel hymn, but made no statement immediately before his execution, which was witnessed by many of his victims' relatives. Rolling was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison on October 25th, 2006, after the U.S. Supreme Court rejected his last-ditch appeal. He was pronounced dead at 6:13 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. If you made it this far, make sure to subscribe for more.